Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about marketing strategy and execution for startups. All right. Okay. So, when you're talking about marketing strategy and execution, there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm going to break it down as far as I can with this. So, I always say sometimes you need a juggernaut and sometimes you just need a coca. Sometimes you need the entire machine to get built. It's going to be self perpetuating like a flywheel. And sometimes you just need somebody to come in and work on a very few tactical things, nurture tracks, email flows, onboarding within like a chat bot. Maybe it's your social strategy, like the piecemeal stuff. Um, but sometimes you need a juggernaut and sometimes you need a coca. Now, I believe that marketing is an art and a science. That when businesses can become predictable, they can drive sustainable growth from that activity. And marketing's role, first and foremost, should be to drive revenue. I'm not much of a brand marketer. I understand that there are companies that have brand marketers as roles, but in a startup space, in a small, mid-sized company space, you really shouldn't be focusing on brand marketing unless your user growth is off the charts. If you're trying to acquire new customers, you have to have a marketing system in place that's actually driving user acquisition. And to have a predictable model for that is always the best. Now, when you're building out your marketing machine, there's many different pieces of this, and depending on your business and where you are focusing your energy and where your customers and audience are, that's where you'll kind of dig into it. And I've broken it up into many different facets. So first we have lead generation, and that's kind of my specialty. These are done through newsletters, your programs, the campaigns, paid ads, things that actually drive users onto your site or to download a piece of content, whatever that may be. Then you have PR, which is media and event outreach. It's contributing articles on other websites and press releases. The most important part of your marketing and your strategy and execution needs to be on your website. And this is where I find a lot of founders, startups, and smaller businesses are lacking, and they're trying to build out all the other pieces of the machine. But the one thing that matters most is your website. So how are you getting those updates done? What are the designs? Is it engaging enough on your site? Are you creating enough pages? You need to rank in Google for all the things that you want. If you only have 7 pages on your website, but let's be realistic, you know, I work with some companies that have maybe 15 to 20 pages on their website. They have their homepage, they have 3 or 4 different product pages, about us section, and some other like piecemeal stuff, the foundational side. But the reality is that those aren't going to get found as much as Google would you would want, because all of these pages aren't optimized for very specific audiences. So if your audience is sales enablement professionals, you should have a sales enablement landing page. If your audience is sales professionals that work in med tech, you should have a page directly specific for them. You should be building out your website presence so that Google knows all the things that you do, and they can push the right people based on search results to your website. Many companies or many people in marketing don't look at the website because it's not as sexy, it's not as fun, but the reality is that needs to be the linchpin of all the other work you're going to do, or it's going to fall flat. So, lead generation, PR, your website. Next, what I'd say is branding. And again, branding is extremely important. I'm just saying, as a first marketer or building your initial team of marketers, you really shouldn't be focusing so much on a brand marketer per se. But one of the things that regular marketers can do is build your brand by leveraging things like your thought leadership. You have executives in your company, you have experts in certain fields. Maybe it's your engineers, maybe it's your security and compliance people. You have individuals in your company that are very good at their jobs. So find ways to mine that information, that intelligence out of them, and creating content from it. And that starts helping build your brand as being an authority in the space. Social media, videos, and memes, these are all parts of brand. Now, social media can be used for lead generation, be used for PR, all these other things. But when I look at social media, the real purpose around that is to build your brand. It's social. You're supposed to be building a dialogue and conversations with your audience. So that's why I put that into the brand bucket. But yes, of course, social media can be used for all these other pieces. Then there's event marketing. And obviously, it's 2020. Physical events, slim to none, if any. But what we saw was a massive uptick in virtual events, from webinars to smaller communities online that built up, like Rev Genius, for example. During the pandemic, I think it was the best time for them to launch this, because all of a sudden, thousands and thousands of salespeople needed a place where they can congregate and get to know each other and network, where physical events were just not possible anymore. Within the event marketing space, you've got registrations, logistics, execution of these events. So how are you managing those? You need to have systems and processes in place to manage the registration, the logistics, who's in a virtual sense, who's running the webinar, who's the host, what's happening with that recording. You have to have a effort, maybe a team, depending on the size of the company, focus on that one side of it if you're running events. Marketing should also be somewhat responsible in some of these smaller companies for customer service. So online reviews, support and social, the emails that are coming in, social support, all the things that are happening from your customer interactions, either from paying customers or free customers, whatever your model is. Somebody should be monitoring the customer service side of things on these channels to make sure that your customers are always feeling like you're being attentive and aware of their issues and helping them. Another part of marketing is the design side. So somebody needs to be very focused. That should be somebody's job, is just design. So who's designing your emails? Your website, again, very important. Social media, presentation decks, things that you're going to be sharing, and all the paid ads, all this stuff comes from a design team. So if you don't have a specific design team in your company, you should go to Upwork or some other marketplace out there and find some designers that you start getting comfortable working with, so that they can start producing these design assets for you. Because most people in marketing, if they're great at events, if they're great at PR, if they're great at lead generation, they're not going to be good at design. It's a totally different mindset, and you need to find the right people or person to kind of run that side of things. Content marketing, that's my love. Within marketing, the content marketer's role is really to produce the assets that are going to be driving the leads. So emails, blog posts, case studies, landing pages, other papers and ebooks. The content marketer's role is to create and curate content in a way that allows them to educate, inform, drive awareness to your audiences, pull them back into your website. Then, if website is the most important, the linchpin among all of these, the next really important piece you need to have in place, and again, it could be somebody in-house, it could be somebody that's a contractor or a freelancer, but you need somebody running systems and operations. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen companies that have had all these other pieces somewhat aligned, but they were missing or severely lacking in the systems and operations side, so that these systems weren't even talking to each other. You're generating leads from 17 different platforms that are all getting put into an Excel spreadsheet somewhere else, and then you had to correlate all of those and put them into something else. Like, it was a big mess for marketers. And marketers that understand operations, they become technical to some extent. I like to think of myself as nerdy at heart. So I create some of the stuff on my own, but I am not a systems operations person. And I rely very heavily on the very technical people that are going to be able to connect my CRM with my email automation platform, or my lead gen forms with my email marketing platform, whatever that may be. You need to have systems and operations. So I've always focused on content and social, but I've been in companies and I've had a piece of all of these different pieces of the pie. These are all areas within the marketing execution of your strategy that you need to be aware of. I also say, within your marketing strategy, you need to start thinking of yourself and your company as a media business. You are now publishers. Content is king. Content is still running everywhere. What you need to do is start thinking through, from a marketing standpoint, how do I become a media producer? What am I going to be creating that's going to drive this audience? That's either going to attract it at the top of the funnel, or how am I going to keep them engaged once they know who we are? Content marketing is more than ebooks, blog posts. It is the fuel that you're going to need. So this comes down to your messaging frameworks. What are the words that you're using? How do you describe your product and service? How do you describe your company? This needs to be codified so that everyone in the company understands the same sheet of music. From a content marketing standpoint, what you would do is you take that messaging framework and then you start building out all of the content you're going to start creating for the next 3, 6 months, year long. This could be ad copy. It could be videos, series of videos, foundational kind of monumental pieces like research reports. All those types of things, you have to start thinking like a media company so that you can start producing this stuff at a quality and also a consistency basis. One of the things that I talked about last week is I also believe that you need to have some type of model in place on how you are using the media. What are you focusing on? So the PISO model, which is paid, earned, shared, and owned, are different parts of media within marketing. So, the paid side, obviously, these are the ads. On the owned side, this is my own website and properties that I own. Earned are the things that are happening from PR and from the external audience, the things that we're doing that are getting noticed. And then the shared piece is what are we creating and how is that lift through our audience as they are resharing things on social media. When you look at the Venn diagram on this, you have your one area that you're going to focus into, but you have to be aware of how all these things play together in order to produce the marketing actions that are going to have the effects that you need within your business. Now, you have all that in place. You have your messaging frameworks. You have an idea of what areas you want to focus into. Maybe it's lead generation and PR. Maybe it's events and with lead generation, whatever that may be. What you then need to start doing is figuring out how you're going to measure this, because another part where I see companies failing all the time is that they build these great ideas and they put a team in place, they start executing, but they have no idea what they're measuring. Sure, it might be number of leads generated, but that's one metric of all the things that you should be measuring. And there's lots of leading indicators, or what I like to call red flags, that you can also track to see if something's going to drop off, if there's an issue somewhere, so you can start diagnosing those problems. Now, when I say measuring, there's a spreadsheet that I typically use around measuring the machine. So it comes down to like the segment, your audiences. What are you spending, if any? If there's ads or something along those lines, if it's spend on, the website, whatever it is, like you have to have a number, and it could be zero if it's, just running a webinar that you're going to be hosting yourself. How many leads are being generated? What are the conversion rates of those leads? So if, pulled in, 500 people, how many of them actually converted to leads or came onto the site? So, say 30% of them hit the website and then converted. So those are new leads. Understanding that conversion rate then starts helping you understand how much traffic you need to push to those pages to get that same conversion. The math usually continues to wash out. There's obviously variations over time, but you want to make sure that you are keeping track of that math. Then you want to track not just the leads, but then what's turning into an MQL, what's turning into an SQL, what are the close rates of those sales qualified leads. And all of these things then start telling you a story about the marketing strategy that you have in place. Is it working? Is it not working? And you can start really figuring out where to dig in or where to expand, or what opportunities are presenting themselves. Because ultimately what you want to do is build up the spreadsheet so that you have your audiences, the spend, all the conversion metrics down to how much revenue you're producing. Because as a marketer, if you can walk into your leadership and say, here's what we did last quarter, and here's how much money we made for the company, it's an extremely powerful conversation to have, as opposed to we generated 3,000 leads and 20% of them were MQLs, which is where a lot of people stop, is that MQL side. You need to be able to figure out how to measure this all the way down to revenue, so that when that question comes up and you need more money for budget, whatever that may be, you can say, here's the numbers. This is what we did. Here's how it washed out through the conversion metrics, and this is the revenue that came in through our efforts. Then once you have that in place, you have the frameworks and you have kind of the spreadsheet or the flow, the waterfall, then you can start really developing what the predictable marketing revenue looks like. So if you know that it takes 1,000 people to get one conversion, what happens if we run a bunch of paid ads and get 5,000 people? Are we going to get 5 people that convert if the math washes out? Then what you want to start figuring out is, okay, what does it cost to actually get that lead? Because we haven't figured that out yet. So once you get through the entire metrics, you can start building in additional formulas. So if I spent $3,000 and I got 100 new leads, you do the math, and that's your cost per lead. Now, what is your cost per marketing qualified lead? It's basically the same math, but just on that number. And you're going to start seeing this number increase, because it might cost you $15 to get the lead initially, but then you realize that by the time, like an SQL, it's costing you a few $100s to get that SQL. Then your marketing leadership, or even you, there's lots of YouTubes that can explain this to you. What you're able to do is then realize, is that cost a good indicator number or a bad one? Are we losing money at the SQL side? Or is this a very flywheel type of repeatable process that we need to dig into? Now, if you're selling a $10,000 product and it's costing you $500 to bring in a lead, you tell me, does that make sense? I would think so. So even though $500 per sales qualified lead would sound like a lot to most marketers because they're like, oh, I'm only working with $10, $15 a lead, you're still working so far in the funnel. Once you have that number, then you can start really driving in and operationalizing it. You can figure out what steps or what criteria those individuals that made it all the way through had that the other ones didn't. You can identify those key data points and then start focusing all of your additional activities on those data points in a larger pool of people. Then you start grabbing more of them and you should start seeing that number of SQL, like the cost for SQL and the number of actual SQLs increasing because you're focusing more of your attention on a very specific audience. And really that's it. Once you get to a point that you have the messaging frameworks in place, you know what areas of marketing you want to really dive into, and you build out the repeatable process with the metrics in place, you will have a solid strategy to execute against. And that's it. Leave a comment down below if this made sense. If you have any questions, put that in the comments as well, and I'll look forward to the next video. See ya.